Hey, it's John. Welcome back to the show, and welcome back to the latest edition of the Live Cuts. The premise of this series is to talk about live albums that don't get enough love or recognition. My guest today, you no doubt know from his appearances on his YouTube channel called The Contrarians. Of course, his many appearances on Sea of Tranquility, as well as the many, many books that he has written about hard rock, heavy metal, and punk rock. Martin Popoff, welcome to my show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, John. This is very cool.
Awesome. Thank you for coming. The album that Martin recommended that I check out today is UFO, BBC Radio 1 live in concert. This was a archival release. This came out in 1992 on Windsong International Records. What you have on this album is you have performances from two different shows, two different tours. The first 8 tracks are from the No Place to Run tour that was recorded on February 4, 1980. And the last 4 songs on here are from the Phenomenon tour from their June 6, 1974 date. We also have two different guitar players on here. We have two lineups because we have the UFO quintet on the first 8 tracks, and we have UFO as a quartet on the last 4 tracks. So this was produced by Jeff Griffin and Pete Ritzema on the first 8 tracks, and Jeff Griffin produced the last 4. The lineup on the first 8 tracks from No Place to Run are Phil Mogg on vocals, Pete Way on bass guitar, Andy Parker on drums, Paul Tonka Chapman on guitars, and Paul Raymond on keyboards and rhythm guitar. For the last 4 songs that are from the Phenomenon tour, we have Phil, Pete, and Andy, but instead of having Tonka on guitar, Paul Chapman, we have Michael Schenker. So, Martin, what was your first experience with UFO's music?
Boy, so I'm 62 now. I guess I got into music and around 6 years old, 1969, rock for the first time. So I got seriously into it maybe 71, 72. It's a really good question. UFO would have been, I think, I would imagine the first UFO album I heard might be Force It. It might be more like 74, so I would have been 11 years old. I don't recall much before that. Heavy album. So I would have heard them around that time. It might even have been No Heavy Petting 1975.
Okay.
But yeah, off to the races at that point. As a kid, I don't know if it came from cousins or older brothers of my partner in crime who was big into music. But yeah, I remember we would have thought the name of the band was cool, the album covers were cool, and eventually would have popped that 4.99, 5.99, and went down to the store, the local drugstore. I mean drugstore. I don't mean head shop. I mean drugstore.
Right.
To buy records.
Yes,
Some
I've been
in
done.
some
Yep.
cases, yeah. And uh and I kind of remember buying No Heavy Petting. So it might have been that one, and loving the heavy songs on it, not thinking they were the heaviest band in the world for us, but being into it. It was a little cold. It was a little cold, a little intellectual for someone that young. We were more the warmth of an Aerosmith and a Kiss and a Ted Nugent and a BTO and a Nazareth. So something about UFO, it did feel a little above us intellectually, not particularly intellectually, but just in terms of the musical sophistication, having keyboards. The album covers were weird, Hypnosis album covers.
Right.
So yeah, just was definitely a big fan, let's say from 1975 forward.
Okay. Now, with me, I came on board much later because when I was coming of age musically in the 1980s, UFO were not at their highest points here in the States. It would have been during the Paul Chapman era. And they didn't play them on the radio here. So it was a band I always knew, but you never heard them. To this day, here on our classic rock stations, Rock 107, WEZX FM, Scranton, Pennsylvania, still locally owned and operated, they still only play 2 songs by UFO. And those are Lights Out and Too Hot to Handle, or Too Hard to Handle. So that's all you ever heard. You didn't hear anything off of Strangers in the Night. I only knew about Strangers in the Night being such a classic live album from always reading about it and eventually picking it up myself. I didn't own anything by UFO until about 8 years ago when I got this Chrysalis Years collection, which tracks the albums from Phenomenon through Strangers in the Night, and it has a bunch of bonus tracks on it. So, I mean, I knew Michael Schenker. I knew more Michael Schenker from the Scorpions.
Mm-hmm.
I knew Lonesome Crow. I knew Love Drive before I knew UFO. Michael Schenker group, you didn't even hear much here, and you still don't. But UFO, I would say I was more in my 40s before I really started getting into them. And then when I picked up this collection, then I was like, okay, now I get it. And while I think Strangers in the Night is the best representation you can have of the band, they have a lot of great songs. Force It, you mentioned before, when I listened to the Chrysalis albums with Michael, to me, that's my favorite of those albums, although I appreciate the diversity that they would have on some of the later albums. It seemed like on Force It, they just stuck with rock. There was only one acoustic song on there. Everything else on there I thought was very melodic and hard hitting. So I got into UFO in the 2010s, as I mentioned. I saw them twice. I saw them in 2017 when they did a co-headline with Saxon. And that was one of the best shows that I ever seen at Penn's Peak in Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania. UFO were the headliner, but it was a co-headline. The fact that Saxon got like an hour 30 and then UFO got an hour 40. And by that point, you still had Phil there. You still had Paul Raymond there. Vinnie Moore was on guitar for many years. Rob DeLuca was on bass, and Andy Parker. But I went there with a buddy of mine, and he was older than me, and he's, to this day, I always say he knew more about music than anybody I ever knew. It was my buddy Jack. And I say knew because he passed away a few years ago. But he didn't know Saxon very well, but I did. But he knew UFO. So this was going to be a treat for us. And we both came out of it really appreciating the band we weren't into as much. And UFO they played songs from around the catalog that night. They did do 2 from Conspiracy of Stars, which is the new release, but they're bouncing around. They're doing stuff from the Paul Chapman era. They're hitting the high points from the Michael era as well. And they put on a very, very good show. And I saw them again 2 years ago. I'm sorry, 2 years later in 2019, same venue. And they came on before Blue Oyster Cult. And I thought they put on the better show than Blue Oyster Cult that night. Mm-hmm. Even though Blue Oyster Cult was they were going around their catalog as well. And that's what I like when bands don't play the same set list all the time. I want them to bounce around. Like Cheap Trick's been doing forever, for example. They're, you know how the show's going to end, but before that, you're going to get a lot of deep cuts. That's what I liked about Blue Oyster Cult. And I always got that vibe about UFO in the 2 times I saw them. So this album came out in 1992. This was actually their 5th live album. So we're just going to go into the album here. A lot of these songs were already out on their previous live album, Strangers in the Night. That one was a double live. This one is 63 minutes. So, and we also got 3 tracks here from No Place to Run, which is the album they would be recording at that point. So, Martin, what are your favorite songs from this live album?
Well, okay, so yeah, with this record, obviously it's a BBC recording from
Yes.
Hammersmith. It's almost like I trust BBC to do a better job in managing UFO's career than UFO themselves. I mean, fifth live
Yes.
album, I don't even have a conception of that because how many official live albums and non-official, one of my favorite ones, even above this, possibly, I could have picked this as well, is when they re-put out a live album from 1980 from a 1982 show called Regenerator Live, and that's even more official of a UFO live album, and this is somewhat as well. But so this came out on Windsong first in 1992, and I was more aware of it through the Griffin release from 1995. Griffin for Canada. Rob Godwin's a good buddy of mine. He ran Griffin Music, and he published my first books. He ran Collector's Guide Publishing. He's just down the highway from me, so that's his doing. But what I like about this is it is my favorite lineup of the band. I love the Tonka era. There's my prized, fully signed No Place to Run. Um,
Nice.
and so it is from that tour. I mean, No Place to Run comes out January 1980. This is February 4th, 1980. So they're just literally just like the record just came out and we're playing this. So by far and away, I just appreciate the way the album starts with the two heaviest songs from this album, Letting Go, and No Place to Run, the title track. One is more of a up tempo marauding. Well, they're both kind of marauding rockers, but one is more of a slow leaden marauding rocker. But what I like about this whole set is that it's just got this rolling thunder power. Everything is played a little slower than
That's true.
usual on this album, and you get a really good heavy drum sound out of Andy Parker on this album as well. So it's powerful, it's rich, but it also has 10, 20, 30% of that Bonham-esque sort of ploipy bass drum sound. It's got kind of a room mic kind of sound to it a little bit as well, but at the same time, it's powerful. John Bonham, in most cases, wasn't recorded that powerfully. So you get that out of the drums. And the other thing that's really cool about this is Andy Parker's just a great drummer. I mean, he's very underrated. When he plays live, he comes alive, and you start hearing some really interesting fills that he does, and some slowing down and speeding up kind of a little bit on Cherry. So there's a real energy to his performance on here. So yeah, those two songs are far and away what I value this album for the most. And next is Mystery Train on here, which is, it's a 50s rock and roll cover, but you would never know it from this album, which is my favorite UFO album, because it's just a total heavy metal song. The way they do it on here, right? With the blues structure. But what else we got here? Cherry is played really heavy, and again, great drum fill. So Cherry almost rises to the powerful status of Only You Can Rock Me, which is also on here. Out in the
That's
Street is on
true.
here. Love to Love is amazing on here as well. Big drums on there. The Mystery Train on here is very wall of sound, electrified, distorted. So it's actually more powerful than on No Place to Run. People complain about the production of this album. It's a George Martin production. They're making it down at Air Studios in Montserrat. I like the production. It's very analog. It's not particularly heavy metal, but it is big and boomy. It's a kind of a strange sound. Um, but yeah, Mystery Train on here is just punk rocking and so heavy. And Lights Out again, a little bit slower and a little groovier, and it gives it a lot of power. Not crazy about what we end up later on. I mean, Built for Comfort, the Willie Dixon cover, don't care at all. But it is a heavy cover. It sounds like the best song off of the Mick Bolton version of UFO. Although
Okay.
we've moved beyond that, but it sounds like if we're going to make a better version of those crappy first two albums, here it is. Um, and then we've got a very kind of intimate and twee Doctor on here. I find there's some interesting little boogie licks thrown into it and stuff. It's kind of weird. And then Shoot Shoot. you hear the piano in Shoot Shoot a little more than you hear on the No Nonsense original, I suppose. But there is some power and some distortion in there as well. So yeah, it's a little bit of a weird album that way. And like I say, I would almost want to cheat the show and bring in also the Regenerator live thing, because that one they're doing all the Wild Willing and the Innocent stuff. It's all new songs except for four on that thing. So it's a similar type thing where that came from a bootleg called Landed in London, and this came from a BBC thing session, right? And they're both archival, like you say. But yeah, I like these. In the spirit of your show, I mean, obviously, Strangers of the Night is the big one, but it's
Right.
nice to talk about these. These lesser known things. And again, I'm always more interested in live albums that are themed upon an album that is lesser known, and then you get songs from it, and that's what I like about that and the Regenerator thing.
Very good. And I'm with you on some of the highlights on here. I love that 1-2 punch of Letting Go and a No Place to Run. Letting Go, you have, to me, the hardest rocket track from No Place to Run. It's the one that really takes you in. No Place to Run, they, by this point, and this is what I read, but it was something I also thought about when I was listening to this. They were getting more into story. Phil Mogg was getting more into story songs in his lyrics. And there was a little bit of Springsteen here, although it doesn't sound quite like Springsteen.
Yeah.
But literally, we're getting into that, right down to going into Jungle Land in the
Yeah.
chorus. Okay, well, that's a famous Springsteen
Yeah.
song.
Yeah. Good point. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Mystery Train. I like what they did with Mystery Train. When I'm reading the liner notes to No Place to Run here, what they were saying about George Martin is he's used to working with the Beatles, and the Beatles, Paul and John in particular, would come into the studio and the songs were already written and they already had the stretcher down. It was like, okay, now make these into albums. With
Hmm.
UFO, they would have remnants. They would have just parts of songs and just riffs. And then he was helping them write while they were writing a lot of this stuff in the studio.
Hmm.
So we may need a cover here. So they tried Mystery Train, and it worked very, very well. It's been
Hmm.
recorded by so many artists, Elvis Presley most famously,
Hmm.
but it's like it was just an old blues song from 1953, and also the band during the last waltz, they also performed this live during that concert on
Hmm.
Thanksgiving Day in
Interesting.
1976. So
Nice.
yeah, so it's been oft recorded, but I love what they do. Paul has that acoustic opening on here, but they bring a lot more oomph to this song. It's more of a driving track, a harder hitting track, I
Yeah.
think, than any of the other versions that you heard. I love the version of Cherry on here as well. Cherry wasn't even on the Strangers in the Night album, but it's one of the most melodic and accessible songs
Yeah.
from Obsession. I think that is a strong track as well. And I do what you said about these songs being a little bit more slower than what we heard on Strangers in the Night, more of a majesty about them. I really appreciate that on here. You have Love to Love. It's not nearly as grandiose, but they're slowing it down just a little bit. It's a little bit different.
Hmm.
Lights Out there, it's not nearly as extended as what you had before, not nearly as showy as you had on
Yeah.
Strangers in. So I think all of the songs here are really strong. You mentioned Built for Comfort here, and that would have been from the 1974 part of this um concert here, or this CD. They made Built for Comfort their own, but they made it really, really heavy. That's an old Willie Dixon blues
Yeah.
song. I like what they did with this, and I like the original that was on Phenomenon as well. One thing that I noticed here, they put Shoot Shoot at the end of this album. Shoot Shoot wouldn't have been out when they put this out. So they were probably already working on this because Force It wouldn't come until the next year.
Yeah,
Because
apparently there's a screw up on the liner notes, and the correct date for that one is just December 11th, 75.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that because I went on Setlist FM and I wanted to see what else they played that night.
Mhm.
And I was able to find all those songs, and I wrote here on the bottom, no shoot shoot.
Yeah.
So while I was doing that, I was like, where did that come from?
Hmm.
But that night when they were doing that BBC recording, they also did Oh My and Space Child from Phenomenon, and they did Give Her the Gun, the single, and the B-side Sweet Little Thing.
Yeah.
Be interesting to hear tracks from that one on here as well.
Hmm.
Another thing I noticed here, excuse me, with the liner notes, they made a huge boo-boo. They have Willie Dixon writing Rock Bottom.
Oh
They
yeah.
have it. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
they give you the credits for all songs written by except, and then they tell you who was all songs written by Pete Wayne, Phil Mogg, except, and then they tell you what they were,
Hmm.
who wrote them. So if you go into track 10, it says Dixon, but that's Rock Bottom on this. Rock
Which one do you have the booklet of, the 92 or the 95?
the booklets.
Or like what label is that, Windsong or Griffin?
This is it. It's from Win Song.
Okay.
That says Win CD
Yeah.
016,
Okay.
and the liner notes are kind of bare bones. It's just this one page
Hmm.
here.
Hmm.
But yes, it's to the point though. You go on allmusic.com and they also have it listed wrong on there.
Okay.
They have Willie Dixon writing Rock Bottom, and then the members of UFO writing Built for Comfort. So so it shows you all music isn't
Yeah.
completely accurate too, although I use it as a source all the time. I've been
Yeah.
for decades. So dig I really dig the versions of the songs here that I had already heard before on Strangers in the Night and the studio albums. You were mentioning No Place to Run being your favorite UFO release.
Hmm.
You were mentioning the production. What I noticed about it, it's very dry. It's kind of like a Back in Black production, I would say, like a Mutt
Boy,
Lang
that's a
production.
great point. I never would have thought that. That's brilliant that you say that. Exactly. Yeah.
It's
Yeah, where
very
there's where there's kind of like natural but not excessive distortion on the guitars. They
right.
sound powerful, but it doesn't sound like there's much effect to them. Like definitely not much distortion pedal kind of thing. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what came out to me. It was like they were trying to make a rock record instead of a hard rock record. So
Mhm.
they scaled down they scaled down the production and made it very very dry.
Mhm.
Like Mutt Lang would do with Foreigner 4 later on. I mean, there was a lot going on there musically on that album. The production I thought was very very dry on there and very accessible. You were
The other thing,
mentioning
John, is it feels like there's a lot of distance between the players. Like there's a lot of space between every. It sounds like everybody's in a different corner of the room. It doesn't sound like a band playing tight together. And I'm not saying that's a negative. Um, it's different from their personalities are all different. I also use that analogy when I talk about bands like the Stranglers or the Who or even Van Halen to some extent. More that the Who is the perfect example. Like four different personalities in four different corners of the room playing a different song each, kind of thing, right?
right,
But this sounds like the drummer is just like he's 10 or 20 yards away from the guitarist, who's 10 or 25 yards away from the bass player, sort of thing. There's kind of an expansiveness about it.
yes.
um but yeah, people complain that it's not heavy sounding enough, and it's like, to me it's just a different kind of heavy.
It is a different kind of heavy. It's yeah, we don't have those distortion on the guitars as we had before.
Mhm.
I guess if you were to look at it retrospectively, it feels more like a classic rock album
Yeah.
than it does a hard rock album.
Yeah.
You're I know this is your favorite UFO release. what would you say? What I would say about it compared to the albums that were on, well, this is on Chrysalis as well, but the albums that were with Michael, they didn't have the knockout tracks, but they were more consistent. Like, I don't hear, like, there's some songs on those albums with Michael where they were trying something and it just wasn't part of their foundation. Although
Mhm.
they did a lot of acoustic songs, I thought, with Michael. And to me, that just wasn't their thing. I
Yeah, it's
mean,
a little more Paul Raymond that you get in that era. I don't like the productions as much either. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I just go with my heart on this. I know a lot of people don't like this, but I go No Place to Run. I would probably go Wild Willing and the Innocent next, and then Mechanics, and then I'll go into the Schenker ones. So I like all three of these. To me, it's the Tonka era, the Neil Carter era. It's more important, almost Neil's almost more important than Tonka in the band.
it, and I'm glad that you mentioned that because yes, he did play a more integral role on those albums. When I went to see UFO in 17, they still had Paul Raymond there.
Mhm.
Paul Raymond had died like 2 months before the second time I'd see him in 2019. And when my buddy and I were talking about the show, they go, well, they gotta get Neil Carter back because he was so important to those mid 80s albums. And then we got him back in. So I got to see Neil Carter live as well. Yes,
Yeah, that's great.
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, he brought a lot to the band, even though the albums may not be as well known.
Yeah, he's like the chief writer on the second and third one, right? On
Mhm.
Wild Willing and Mechanics. Which are a lot of fun. I mean, when I grew up, I mean, we kind of like were a little disgusted with Mechanics because there's something else on there, and it's a little mellower. The production's not that great on it. It's kind of a scrappy, mid-rangey production, but I've just learned to love it more over the years. To me, it's a little bit of this analogy when I'm on with Pete Pardo of CM Tranquility. We did a show about this where I tend to like late 70s versions of band versus early 70s versions of bands, all these bands that we love, because the early 70s versions to me sound cold and clanky and they kind of depress me a little bit. With UFO, it's more like I like the early 80s version of the band more than the late 70s version of the band, because I find the late 70s version of UFO a little cold and clanky and brash and almost like a little too European.
Okay.
And then those Ron Nevison productions I'm not particularly crazy about. So yeah, I think they're just more playful, more cheerful, just a little more fun and rock and rollsy on those first three albums. And Making Contact. I'm quite a fan of Making Contact as well.
Okay, so you really appreciate those albums so much now, but what did you think of them upon first release?
Well, instantly I love No Place to Run. See, this is the other thing that we talk about, Pete and I have talked about. There are
Mhm.
certain bands where nobody has a clue what their favorite album is by that band because there's no far and away absolute classics. Deep Purple's a little like that, but Van Halen is like that. And UFO is like that. I mean, you ask a absolute Schenker era lover of UFO what their favorite UFO album is, and they get cranky about it because they're frustrated because they don't love any of those albums a lot. They just have to kind of pick one because they're all about the same. They're all like 8s or 7.5s in my mind. So I never feel like super passionate about any of them album wise. But like you say, I mean, they've got these big Stone Cold classic songs, but they're riddled throughout all the albums. I mean, I pick Obsession from those. But I'm not in love with Obsession really. I don't really love it. But these first three I love. I mean, I would almost put Making Contact ahead of two or three of those as well.
Very good. What I was going to ask here is Young Blood is a single on No Place to Run. When I listen to that, I think that's a misstep. I don't think that was the right single. It's my least favorite song on No Place to Run. It sounds like like we talk about
They don't got a
songs,
lot of choice besides that, though. Here, everything's either too heavy or too mellow. Besides that one, right?
like Take It or Leave It would be a great, I thought was a very strong ballad, but I don't know if you want to put that as your
Yeah,
first single.
yeah.
Maybe Money Money. I would go with that.
See, John, the reason I love this album so much, I'm an angry young metalhead, right? Still, I love the heavy stuff, but if you asked me what my 10 favorite softer UFO songs are, they're all on here. I think This Fire Burns Tonight, Gone in the Night, and Any Day are absolute classics. So
Nice.
this album is weirdly propped up for me by these lighter songs on here. And not the Paul Raymond type later songs. These more darker, cool ones that's got the full band going and stuff, and not so much piano. So that's why I love those ones, especially "Gone in the Night" and "Any Day." "Any Day" is kind of a heavy song, but it's so weird with that little bass riff, and then it kicks into this big, really cool, passionate, heavy part. So that's why I love it. I mean, I just they cover off everything on here. But when you get into the Schenker era and you've got these little Paul Raymond ballads and stuff on it, I just that they lose me on that. I don't want to hear any of that stuff in that era.
Did they play live in Canada a lot?
No. Well, only in later years, it seems. Well,
Okay.
maybe they did, and I missed them because I wasn't living in a big town, but I don't think so. But I saw them more or less in later years. They would, in the club years, they'd come here and play a place called the Rock Pile. And then I saw them in Buffalo in a club, and I saw them in Akron, Ohio in a club. So it's only kind of then, and yeah, they became kind of regulars, just like Michael, just like Uli, you know.
Yes, that's true.
In the mid 90s, we thought we'd never see any of these guys ever again. And all of a sudden they're showing up every second day, at a club kind of thing. It was amazing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and that came for me, it came later because I saw all those acts in similar sized venues. Michael and well, actually, Michael Uli and UFO played the same small theater, which is about 90 miles from me, that only holds 325 people,
Mm.
and they'll sell it out. Michael Schenker sold it out quick. UFO sold it out quick. Only John Roth took a little bit,
That's
but they're
small,
all
man. I've never heard of a venue that small. That's really small.
small. Yeah, 325. It will,
Yeah.
and there's no balcony, and they have cabaret seats up front,
Mm.
which are more expensive.
Yeah.
But if you get those cabaret seats, Michael Schenker is like 8 feet away from you, and you're just looking up, and you're like, oh, there's Michael right there.
Yeah.
So yeah, so fortunately, I was able to experience that. UFO played that same theater, but when I saw them with Sax and Blue Oyster Cult as like a co-headline, I was seeing them in a 1,800 seat venue,
Yeah.
which it was like portable as far as if there was going to be general admission or if it was going to be seating. It all depended on what
Yeah.
we wanted. When you're going to see them at the Sellersville theaters, where I'm talking, we're all in these. It's this old theater that was built in the late 1894, and all the seats are nailed down.
Mm.
So it could be it can be any kind of performance, whether it's an intimate performance near leaning towards jazz or classical or hard rock. We're still seeing it the same way, but the acoustics
Mhm.
in that venue were awesome, and the bands still like to go back there,
Yeah.
play there. We don't get Michael Schenker as much as we used to because he's playing bigger venues more often now, because I think what's happened with him is I think a lot of people are starting to even discover him now, even though he made his most popular records in the 70s, but he's gotten to the point where he's getting that that legacy status now, I would
Well,
say.
yeah, and when you reunite with all these old legends and put them all together, yeah, they would come to Toronto. They played the Danforth Music Hall, which is I think around 1,200 or 1,500. Pretty full. So he moved up above the club thing too. But when he first started coming here, he would play the Rock Pile when it was the non-classic lineup, right? It was just him and kind of more modern guys. But soon as he started putting that reunion thing together, yeah, it was going around to all sorts of big cities and doing pretty good numbers.
Yeah, and that was going on here as well, although I never got a chance to check out those shows. But yes, that was hitting the bigger venues here as well.
Yeah.
One thing I'd like to ask you about, when I've been doing this live cut series, and it's almost like you guys that I'm bringing on are almost like behind my back, purposely picking these albums that were recorded at Hammersmith Odeon.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'll tell you, because here's the thing. I did the Sensational Alex Harvey Band live, and that one I chose on my own, and I asked Logan Collins to join me. So we talked about that live album from Hammersmith Odeon. But since then, I have talked about Whitesnake Live in the Heart of the City with Tim Derling. I've talked about Rock Will Never Die with Peter Kerr. And we're talking about this. Oh, I've talked about Blackfoot Highway Song Live with Matt Thompson. All of these albums, they're all or partly recorded at Hammersmith Odeon in London, England. Do you think, what do you think was the thing about Hammersmith Odeon? Is it the acoustics of the venue? Is it the passion of those fans from the UK that would
Well,
bring
I
these
would I
bands?
would just guess, but I've never really thought about it. I
Okay.
don't know the particular things about the mechanics of the room or what, if it's just one recording system that's used for all these things. But I would say the fact that it's kind of like a hometown gig for most of these guys is a good thing. And also, if you think about the other unifying factor with all these, is they're all recorded in the heat of the new wave of British heavy metal. So there are all these legends
That's
coming
true.
and playing like right in the middle of this thing. They're like the grandfathers of the new wave of British heavy metal. And so metal is just going off the charts. People are just super excited about it. And here's these legends playing this perfect size venue. I think it's a 3,000er, isn't it? Roughly in that range.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the cool thing about it as well. But yeah, you'd have all your friends and family out to these gigs. Maybe for a lot of these guys, they just come from home to the gig. There's just not in the middle of some grueling tour. And all the stuff, all the mechanics of how to record this stuff is all sorted out because they have all these business relationships in town. So that would be my guess.
That would make sense. And Blackfoot, while they're from the southern part of the United States, they had a very strong following in the UK because
Yeah.
they're a heavier southern rock
Yeah.
that would go over the hard rock and metal audiences. So when they put out Highway Song Live, they didn't put out in the United States for
Yeah.
another 20 years. They originally just kept it in the UK because they said, oh, we'll put it out for the Americans later because the fans are really into what we do here.
Yeah.
Just much like the fans were so into the UFO performance and the Whitesnake performances and the Michael Schenker group performances. Another thing I checked out on here because it wasn't listed on the liner notes for this album. It said on here where those first 8 songs from No Place to Run were recorded. It didn't say where the songs from 74 were recorded, so I'm assuming that's at Hammersmith Odeon. It was actually at Golders Green Hippodrome
Yeah.
and also in London, and now it's a church. It's
Mm.
owned by the Hillsong Church, and I think it's been like that off and on. And they've used this venue, particularly in the 70s. They used it a lot as a live venue. Most notably, bands like Queen had played there, but it's worked off and on as a place of worship and a live venue. So that was
Mm.
something. I mean, I never heard of that
Mm.
until I looked into that.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah,
So,
like I say, I would recommend also people check out that Regenerator live album, which got put out as an official. And like I say, it came from a bootleg, originally landed in London, and that's January 28th, 82. And on there we've got We Belong to the Night, Let It Rain,
nice.
Long Gone, Wild Willing and the Innocent, No Place to Run, Doing It All for You, Making Moves, and Mystery Train. And only 4 old songs, four Schenker era songs.
Oh,
So
sweet.
so if you really like this Tonka era, check that one out too.
Absolutely. You interviewed the band members for the two books that you've done on UFO,
Yeah.
how engaging were they as far as talking about the band Stretcher making these albums, doing these live shows and things of that nature?
Boy, that's a good question. How are the UFO guys as interviews? So Phil is kind of hard to understand. He cracks jokes and he doesn't give long answers and he's a little flippant and he's smart, but he has a real sort of Keith Richards mumble to him. So that's a problem on the phone. He's better in person. Michael Schenker can be. He doesn't have a lot to say because English is still his second language. He's good. He tries to give you his emotions and tell you what he's thinking, and he's very forthright. But it comes out kind of awkwardly, and you got to push him a little bit, right? Andy's a good interview. Paul Raymond was a good interview. Pete Way was a good interview. Who else? Neil Carter's great to talk to. I talked to a bunch of the minor characters all along the way as well. Lawrence Archer and Atomic Tommy M. Um, Boy, who else are we missing? Danny Peyronel, he was good. Never talked to Mick Bolton. Um, but yeah, they're generally pretty good. I wouldn't say there's even a single guy in there though that was a great interview who would just like
Okay.
give you really super interesting things about the songs and insights into them and stuff like that, right? Um, all polite and perfectly charming and stuff, but no, not a ton of great introspection there, or great because even Pete Way could be a little mumbly and Phil Mogg like as well, a lot of the rather and all the little English mannerisms, and then but then not a lot of like good substantial sentences, kind of thing, right? So
Yes.
yeah, it took quite a few interviews, and I talked to a lot of the producers as well. I find that's a really good gold mine when it comes to interviewing. Producers have a lot of good stuff to say about albums quite often. They're always they are equal to most of the band members, I think, if you want to learn something about an album.
Okay, and that makes perfect sense in a lot with the producers. I mean, they're
Yeah.
gonna know about how they're adjusting everything and how they want certain what should be accented and emphasized in a song. Where can we find a hook on here?
Yeah.
What can we do as a single? Which one would have the most traction? Would get more people to hear the album? So I would think, yeah, the producers would
Yeah.
be very important as well. So, Martin, how would you rank BBC Radio Live in concert on a scale from 1 to 10?
I'd probably give it a 7. I'm not a big live concert person or even live album person.
Okay.
And the other problem with this record, unfortunately, is it is fragmented. I mean, it is. We've got the well, it's all old when the thing comes out, but we've got the more recent old, and then we've got the super old on here.
Right.
Um, but the first part, I honestly think that on this one and even on Regenerator, there's even a better drum sound than you get even on Strangers in the Night. So I really like that about them. I love Andy's performance. So if we just take the first, I think it's what, 10 tracks, or no, 8 tracks. Yeah, first 8 tracks on here as a live album. It's a really good, solid live album, a good mix of old and new, and I think I do like that slowing, because usually you hear bands will speed things up when they play live,
Right.
and this is just kind of made more powerful. And the other thing, just to mention briefly, when we like live albums a lot, and what makes live albums useful is if and when you think the studio album was a really bad production, and live is just, Kiss is a great example of that, where people complain about the first 3 studio albums, but they love the Kiss Alive versions, right? So
Right.
so I think in this case, if you are definitely not a fan of the No Place to Run production, here you get, a tougher, more powerful, more distorted, more band-like, marauding gang of drinking guys walking down the street version of it, rather than the sitting at Montserrat and having George Martin try to record this heavy metal band, sort of thing. So I think that's a plus to it as well. But yeah, let's go with 7.
Okay. Very good. I go in an 8 on this. I do like the songs that they included on here from No Place to Run. I thought Letting Go and No Place to Run are a great one too. I like the fact that we got a live version of Cherry here, which I think is one of the highlights on Obsession. I do appreciate the fact that they did play these at a slightly slower tempo, adding a bit of a heaviness to them, more of a majesty to them. So we're not getting a complete knock like a Michael Schenker ripoff here. Paul Chapman has a different style than Michael, but his style still fits within the songs, is playing on the what would be the new songs at that time on No Place to Run is very, very strong. We have the last 4 songs from the early UFO. We're talking Phenomenon here. So when we're going into a song like Rock Bottom, they're stretching it out, but it's not the big showcase that it would become later. The version of Shoot Shoot, even though it was recorded in 75 but not noted on here, is very strong. And of course, Built for Comfort. I like what they did with Built for Comfort. They took this basic blues song and they made it like drive, like grinding and heavy. I wouldn't say it's driving. It's still slow. It's a slow song.
It's a little bit like something you might get on Black Sabbath, Black Sabbath.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like the way it's done structurally. Yeah, I would
Yeah.
agree with that. It's just doesn't have as much crunch to it like what Sabbath would
Yeah.
be. Yes. So I would give this an 8 out of 10. This is UFO BBC Radio 1 live in concert. So, what do you think of UFO's music? And what do you think of this album? Have you heard this album? As far as live albums, do you only know Strangers in the Night? What are your favorite songs by UFO? If you're a big UFO fan, when did you get into the band? And have you seen them live? Whether you've seen them with Mick Bolton, Michael Schenker, or Paul Chapman, or Atomic Tommy M, or Vinnie Moore in the guitar position. Please let us know in the comments. Martin, thank you so much for joining me today and recommending this live album that I did not know coming in, and a live album that deserves more love and recognition. UFO BBC Radio 1 live in concert. So, Martin, what do you have going on the Contrarians? What books do we have coming up as well, or any reissues that you have coming up?
Well, the big one's out right now. Up behind me here, you see the yellow, the big fat Dio book, the big fat deep purple book, and then right next to that, that's 3 copies of the Accept is back in print, and I updated that. That's actually not even at my website yet. After the tariff thing, I knocked down the number of books that I'm selling now, so I'm not carrying everything, even if it's in print. So I got about 30 different titles. But besides those big, fat, really nice Schiffer Publishing ones, which I can send to the States as well, sign them and send them. The ones that I had just updated and changed, new covers, added a few things, is Scorpions, Whitesnake, Merciful Fate, and Max Webster. And then, so there's the Accept. And yeah, I am selling the 2 UFOs. I've got the Thin Lizzy panel book and the 2 Black Sabbaths, Born Again and Sabotage. I got a Van Halen soft cover version of the visual biography. And then Contrarians, of course, is our video show. We're doing stuff there all the time. And I've got my audio podcast, History in 5 Songs with Martin Popoff, up to 335 episodes of that. One of those comes out every week.
Very, very good. And definitely, any of you out there, check out History in 5 Songs with Martin Popoff. It is wonderful. I listen to it regularly. Martin really digs deep. He goes into places in his topics that you would never even think about. But when he gives you all the examples of what he's talking about in regards to the premise of this show, you're thinking, your wheels are turning in your head. You're like, oh, I never even thought about that. So it's definitely a great show to check out. Something
thank you.
You're very welcome. I listen to it often and I really love it just as much as the books, and not just the 2 that I'm part of in the panel books. So
yeah.
Thank you all so much for joining us today. Do what you love, and we'll talk to you soon.